Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I thank my colleagues for their questions. Many of the questions that I was going to ask have been asked, but I want to follow up, Mr. Janikin, on the discussion that you were having with regard to the merchant marine, the critical role that it plays, and also, Admiral, in your opening statement, you mentioned the issue of LNG. We will be shipping LNG offshore. This year, actually, Cheniere will begin its process. I think you are all aware of my particular interest in this. It may take 100 LNG ships to handle just the Cheniere shipments. The issue of safety is of utmost importance. We know that under current law, imported LNG must be handled by American sailors, merchant marine. We passed a bill last year in the Coast Guard authorization that authorizes the Secretary to have discretionary authority on export. Mr. Janikin, what is the status of that discretionary authority? How will it be used with regard to the export from the Cheniere facility in Texas?
Ranking Member Garamendi, thank you for that question. We've done a number of initiatives. First, we've reached out to the LNG industry to try to better understand what it is they're shipping, how much they're shipping, and where they're shipping from to be able to do that. We have partnered with the Department of Energy in a task force that's associated with the Committee on Marine Transportation, looking at specifically at alternative energies. We've also, as part of our international engagement with the bilaterals that we do on a maritime basis and also what we do internationally, I've personally talked with members of the Japanese delegation, the South Korean delegation, the Chinese delegation with regard to some of these particular issues. I will say that they're not taking root very effectively, but we are continuing to gauge on that to see if there's opportunities in some kind of agreements that we might do. We're also taking a look, talking with our shipyards in terms of their capacity. I think you know that the last LNG vessel that we built 16 of them back in the 70s and the 80s. That the last one was built in 1980. The yards that did that here in the U.S. are no longer building commercial vessels, so we have some challenges to be able to reconstitute that particular capacity. So we're doing a number of things to make sure that we can understand and be able to exercise the direction that you provided, sir.
Specifically, having looked at all of that, is it the policy of the administration to encourage the construction, the building of LNG tankers in the United States? Is that your policy, or is it not?
That is what we are working to put together as a policy to do that. It is not firmly set yet. I'm working on that to be able to get to the Secretary.
Well, let me be very clear where I'm coming from. There are three critical national security elements involved in the LNG issue. First of all, the natural gas itself is a strategic asset of the United States. It has led to the repowering of many of our electrical power plants, and it has allowed us to have a significantly lower energy cost than many of our competitors. It is a strategic asset here in the United States. Secondly, the shipbuilding industry is absolutely critical to the Coast Guard, to the U.S. Navy, and to the what remains of the American merchant marine. Thirdly, the merchant marines themselves are critical. We've seen the discussion, part of it today, that the merchant marines are absolutely critical for the, that's not only the mariners, but also the ships, critical to the national defense. 90% of military supplies are by ship. Now, I do represent Travis Air Force Base and the Air Mobility Command. We love C-5As and 17s. However, that's a small percentage of the material that needs to be moved around the world. So we have three critical national security elements involved in the LNG trade. We should require that all LNG exported from the United States be on American ships so that these three elements of national security are enhanced. A lot of mariners would be put to work. You mentioned the number of mariners that have lost their job, 2,000 in the last 3 years. They could be on these ships. The shipbuilding industry can build these ships. They're going to take a time to gear up, perhaps 3 to 5 years. So there would be a phase-in period of time for the LNG ships to come online. And finally, it is a security issue. The Chairman may have stacked the deck a little bit by mentioning Yemenis and Somalians and others that might be on these ships, and in fact, perhaps they are on the ships. We don't know. But we do know that every American mariner is licensed. And we know who they are. We have their thumbprints. We have their identification. And all of these volatile cargoes, at least in American ports, in and out, ought to have American mariners. That ought to be our policy. And that ought to be your policy, Mr. Janikin. And you should ask for nothing less, and the Coast Guard should be equally certain, since the safety of our ports is your business, Admiral. So having done that, I want to hear specifically where you are, Mr. Janikin, in this process. I know you're not going to get it today. Next, I'm going to take just a few more minutes, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman. The National Maritime Strategy was supposed to be delivered to this committee last week. Where is it, Mr. Janikin?
Sir, it is going to be late, as you and I previously discussed. One of the challenges, I want to make sure that the National Maritime Strategy that we deliver is the right one. I think we're only going to get one chance at this to be able to get it right. We have done a significant amount of effort to make sure that we have captured stakeholder input, to make sure we've captured what are going to be required. And one of the things that was included in that Coast Guard authorization was that I have to also coordinate it within the interagency. That process takes a little bit longer than
let me guess, it's stuck in OMB. Is that correct?
The interagency process takes some time, sir.
So it's stuck in OMB. Well, we'll see if we can pry it out of OMB. I assume that you've worked with the Coast Guard on this strategy. Is that correct, Mr. Janikin?
We have personally talked with him, sir. I've also met with Chairman Cordero and his commissioners, and we have done a lot of what I would call the interagency engagement. I still have some drafting of the physical requirements to do, so we've gotten their feedback, and I'm now in the process of drafting. So it's
I suspect that the Chair and I would be interested in having a conversation with you about the general issues that are in the current strategy. We may have some views ourselves, so I would appreciate that conversation. Next, PL 480. I understand that USAID, OMB, Departments of Agriculture, Transportation have been involved in negotiating some sort of a new PL 480 program. Is that correct?
Mr. Garamendi, you are correct.
My understanding is also none of that information has been shared with the people that actually write the laws, us. So when do we hear what the new strategy is?
Sir, what is in the President's budget for fiscal year 16 is a 25% local and regional purchase requirement. Our budget supports that. What is being discussed is something more expansive than that. That legislative language, I know, is being drafted, and it's not at a point I think it's ready to be delivered to you.
Well, we have two critical issues here that are kept secret from the Congress. Not a good thing to do. It's kind of useful to brief us along the way. You can get some input from us, may give a better direction, more likelihood of something actually happening. That fact that it hasn't been done is disturbing. If I might, Mr. Chairman, there's one further question, and this is to the Admiral, and it has to do with your new airplanes that you're getting from the Air Force. Neat little things, the C-27J models. Do you have any money to upgrade those and to make them compatible with the Coast Guard requirements?
Congressman, we do, and we have an appropriation to do so. In fact, that work is ongoing as I speak.
Let me guess, the continuing resolution makes it impossible for you to actually do the work?
Some of this work is actually ongoing, and so we are still on a timeline where we will have 4 C-27Js in Sacramento in 2016.
I do like the word Sacramento. My understanding is that they are to replace the C-130J model or H model.
This is actually a mid-range aircraft, and so we have a C-144, which originally the program of record was for 36 We have 18 of those C-144 aircraft, and as you know, we have 14 C-27Js, which is a much more capable aircraft. So we're reassessing, is that total of 18 and 14, will that meet our service needs into the 21st century?
Okay, as the C-27s come on board, they are not all coming at once. They're going to be spread out over 3-4 years. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
At the same time, we will be
hiatus and therefore an insufficient number of aircraft, depending on the timing of the arrivals of the 27s?
That's a good question. And so we're phasing the arrival of the C-27Js with the dispatching of Hercules version of the C-130, which is going to the Forestry Service. In fact, that first aircraft of 8 is in the process of its transition as well. So the timing of that, so we don't create a gap for the Coast Guard, as the C-27Js come on board, the C-130H will go over to the Forestry Service, and that will happen over a period of the next 3 years.
There is or is not a gap?
Right now, there will be a small gap, but it's a negligible one.
Where will that gap be?
This is near shore, since it's a mid-range aircraft, and right now our greatest gap is when we're using long-range surveillance in the drug transit zones, which are normally staged out of a foreign country.
I'd like to get into this a little more detail about the gap. The Forest Service will not be able to use those airplanes immediately because they have to be reconfigured for firefighting. And it may not be in the interest of drug interdiction and long-range surveillance that a gap exists at all. I think I can go on and on with a whole series of questions here about that issue, but I'd like to get some more detail on that. Final point is that last week I was with the President of Panama and had a discussion with him about their desire to work more closely with the Coast Guard. Actually, he was willing to establish some sort of a station and facility in Panama that would be available to the Coast Guard to be used. I know you have some facilities there now, but there would be a possibility of a more integrated facility. And finally, back to Port Hueneme, the Navy will be flying its Poseidon version of the Global Hawk out of Port Hueneme, and they'll be doing exercises in that area, training exercises. That piece of equipment observes the ocean well. I would like to have a discussion with you about using the Poseidon information in their training as they observe the Southern California coastal area. You might find it to be useful. Thank you very much. Yield.
Thank the ranking member. I'd like to recognize Mr. Graves.